Hey there, beautiful, brassy, gorgeous people. What's up? I hope life is going well in your corner of the world. Lots of exciting things have been happening here lately at Brassy Broadcast Central. I'm in the middle of a week of stellar rock and roll. It started with the Foo Fighters show late last week, and I have to say, if you get the opportunity to go see them, just go. It's pretty much everything you would ever want to see in a rock and roll show. And Dave Grohl rocks harder sitting down with a broken leg than just about anybody on 2 feet. And they did a killer cover of Rush's Tom Sawyer. Lots of air drumming going on around me. Coming up later this week, I get to see Van Halen. And the cherry on top is I get to chat with Cher Ross from Vixen for an upcoming episode. I had posters of both Van Halen and Vixen on my wall back in the day. So I have to wonder if little 14-year-old Jen is just having the best, most superstellar week ever in some parallel universe. Thanks for dropping in today to hear my conversation with the super talented Julie Randolph. Julie is a fellow Hoosier that is now mixing sound on Broadway. We chatted about her experience as a woman working in live sound production, how your attitude is key to not only getting through the day, but actually getting additional work, and how she stays present while mixing a show. Julie's been the production engineer for Jersey Boys Broadway since its inception in 2004. As production engineer under sound designer Steve Canyon Kennedy, she helped open Jersey Boys productions in Chicago, Las Vegas, and London, as well as 2 national tours. And she served as mixer opening the Broadway revivals of Guys and Dolls in 2008 and Jesus Christ Superstar in 2011. You try saying Jesus Christ Superstar without singing it. It's almost impossible. And Julie toured for over 5 years with various musical theater productions, including the first national tours of Hairspray and Elton John and Tim Rice's Aida. She's a member of IATSE and has an AS in audio technology from Indiana University School of Music. And she's got a really exciting project in the works.
You know, I kind of fell into it. When I was a kid, I had piano lessons and I played clarinet really badly in the band in 7th grade. And I started taking guitar lessons when I was about 12. So I always had an interest in music. I never really had a great deal of talent as a performer. So I was also interested in the technical aspects of, all of that. I did stage crew in high school, and my high school is rather large in Indiana, and we had a big it was the J. Everett Light Career Center at North Central, and so they had these big 3-hour vocational classes that you could take, and they had a radio TV one, so I took that, and so I did that for 2 years. So it was just sort of through all of these different interests that I sort of fell into realizing that I was decent at the sound aspect of music. And I just sort of, I guess, followed that path. It's very much one thing always seems to lead to the next in this business. I don't know if that's more so than other businesses or not, but.
Do you remember what your first memory was of music or sound when you're like, oh, well, what's that? And you just first kind of became aware of it?
It was definitely some kind of harmonies playing on my parents' stereo system, probably like Simon and Garfunkel or something like that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
When I was really little, my parents used to play music. The stereo was going all the time. And I remember my dad actually has a really nice singing voice that he just sort of breaks out secretly. And
nice.
So those harmonies that I heard playing on the radio or on the stereo were the things that really hooked me. And anytime I hear, a well-written harmony, like Jayhawks are one of my favorite. The Graham Parsons album with Emmylou Harris on it,
oh yeah,
breaks my heart. I just love that stuff.
Yeah, me too. So what took you down to IU then? Because I know that you're an IU grad in audio technology. What was kind of that next step where you're like, oh, hey, this is, like you said, I am kind of good at this. Is that just the next step for you?
You know what brought me to IU was waitressing.
Really?
Waitressing at a shit restaurant. I mean, and I'm trying to tell my kids this, and some of them are getting it and some of them are not. But so I did go to college right out of high school. I had a scholarship at Butler University in Indianapolis. And I wasn't really quite ready. I did a year and I dropped out and I waited tables, and I waited tables for 3 years, and I hated it and I wasn't good at it, but I had to work, and it made me realize that that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And, I've met some waitresses that are awesome and love it, but
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people. So it was that knowledge that I wanted something more that led me to IU. And I actually went in as a music major. Their program has changed a little bit since I went, a million years ago. Um, but the audio program is part of their School of Music, not part of the theater department. So it's a whole different thing. And at the time, you could get this associate's degree. You could get a BS in music and an outside field and pick audio as the outside field or whatever.
Oh,
I ended
cool.
up doing just the associate's degree because I believe, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not actually that talented as a performer. So I'm definitely eating better now doing sound than I would be playing guitar.
Oh, good. How did you end up working on Broadway?
I think I'm going to try to figure that out because it is sort of a leap from recording arts to live sound for theater.
Yeah.
Well, while I was at IU, my professor, at the time it was Wayne Jackson who was doing the program there, he had his own PA company and he used students as, the labor for whatever he did. He did a lot of, corporate type stuff like business meetings, but he did a lot of rock and roll. There was a lot of really, really good experience. And I found that studio versus live, the live aspect of things interested me a lot more. And we had to do an internship to complete the degree. And I chose the Dallas Theater Center for my internship based solely on two facts. And one was that it was far from Indiana, and the other was that they actually paid you a little bit, which was not much. Like, I think maybe it was $250 a month or something, but most internships don't pay anything at all. So,
Exactly. Yeah, that's huge.
yeah. So I was interning in Dallas, and then somebody from the Arizona Theater Company offered me an actual paying job mixing their musicals. So I moved to there. From there, somebody offered me a gig doing musicals in San Diego. So I moved to there, and then I moved back to Arizona. And that's where I joined the union. And at some point, an offer to go on the road with Annie Get Your Gun came through as the assistant. So I went out on the road with Annie Get Your Gun.
Oh, cool.
And then really, really one thing leads to the next. It was just somebody from a different show needed a spot filled, and on and on and on, up to the point where my last tour that was out, my boss had this workshop that he was doing of a new show, and they were doing it in La Jolla. And my idea was that I would take a leave from the tour and do this workshop and then come back. But we weren't able to work that out with the replacement. So I figured it was probably a decent enough time to get off the road, at least temporarily. But that workshop turned out to be Jersey Boys, which, and the rest
Nice.
is history. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad gig, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you love most about working in theater?
It's a really comfortable environment. That probably sounds really strange, but there is a lot of creativity. There are hugely talented people that I work with every day. I don't get to see a lot of theater, in my schedule. With the show schedule, we don't really get to see a great deal of other people's work. You have to really make an effort, and the planets have to line up to be able to do that.
Oh, sure.
But I feel like I have just found what fits me really well, and it's a very comfortable environment to be in, and I like the people that I work with, and I'm doing what I'm good at. And it's a far cry from I've done a lot of things that I am not good at. So having something that I am good at feels really good.
Oh, definitely. Is there anything that's kind of like what's the most challenging part of mixing sound for a Broadway show?
It changes show by show, and the group dynamic that you're in on a show has a lot to do with it. And I think it also changes with the length of time the show has been running. For instance, on Jersey Boys right now, the most challenging part is not getting the faders up at the right time, because I've been doing that part for 10 years, and
Hmm.
that's, I can do it in my sleep. The most challenging part is staying present during the mix for each show, and also being able to have reasonable conversations with the cast. The how do I say this, like, diplomacy,
Uh-huh.
because in theater everybody has two jobs. They have their job and sound.
Yeah.
It's one of the jokes that we say, like, everybody has an opinion on the sound, and it's your job to recreate the sound design that the designer had. You do this on a nightly basis, but you still have to listen to the cast if they're having issues, and listen to them, but not drastically change what the intent of the show is. Basically, you've got to play nice with the other kids in the sandbox. You just have to be able to work with people and not piss people off.
That's
And
always a challenge, isn't it?
it truly does become the most challenging thing in a long running show. Because by that point you've got the mix down.
Right.
No, the other part, especially in a long running show, is that you will have a lot of subs. You'll have a lot of subs coming through in the band, and a lot of understudies going on, and swings, and people changing out, the who's in what part tonight.
Hmm.
So those variables are huge in how your show lands. And your audience can play a factor in that too. If you have let's say, a particularly drunk audience that is very vocal and you have to mix over them, or
Wow.
if you have a fight going on behind you. Now, this doesn't happen on every show. It's like basically Jersey Boys and Rock of Ages have the most fights, but more
That's
audiences are
fantastic.
more well behaved.
You can check out my conversation with Tony Award nominated producer Janet Billig Rich in episode 25, where Janet talks about the work she did for both the stage and movie versions of Rock of Ages. So what kind of tricks do you have to help you stay present on a show that you've been doing for a while?
This is going to sound really weird, but truly, I have a meditation practice and I do yoga, and that's helped me more than I can say in every other aspect of my life. Absolutely, with the show, because I've learned from being like, and I do hot yoga.
Uh-huh.
So it's a real ass kicker, and
Yeah.
me personally, I have to completely focus in that class, or else I'm face down, passed out on the mat. So
Uh-huh.
like, that skill, I bring into the show, and it's easier now to focus on the show than it used to be for me. It's all about being able to quiet my mind and just listen to the show. It sounds like such a simple thing, but when you have a life outside of work and it's encroaching on all of your thoughts, it makes it difficult to follow and stay in there, and you have to stay in there. So being able to learn how to quiet my mind and focus has been the biggest help to me in work.
That makes a lot of sense. And now I'm like, oh my God, I haven't been to yoga in ages and I should probably go back.
It's helpful.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell. And people around me can tell. Like, I've been asked, oh, have you not been to yoga in a while?
It's like, oh, are you off your meds? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Why am I a cranky troll?
Yeah.
It's time to go back. What's the most bizarre sound issue you've come up against that you've had to try to fix?
Bizarre. Well, in Jersey Boys at this point, we've been running for 10 years. All, and I mean all, of our troubleshooting issues now are bizarre. It's just that point in the life of the system where it's not just, oh, there's the pin 1 down on line 25. It's going to be a combination of a whole bunch of crap piled up on top of each other. You're going to have like 3 failures that are intermittent, so
Oh,
anytime
no.
we have something go wrong on the show, it takes us a little while to suss it out. But I think the most challenging problem that I ever had was on Jersey Boys, and it was a long time ago, probably 2007 or something. And we have a very old console there. It's called a CADAC, and it's what all Broadway shows used to use. Everybody's digital now. I think we're one of 2 CADACs remaining on Broadway.
Oh, cool.
So it's this funky old British console. it's analog, but it is controlled by a computer. So the only thing that happens if your computer goes down, you just lose all of your like your automation, your assignments, who shows up on what VCA, and the sends turning off and on and all of that stuff. And mixing for Broadway, it's a very complicated mix. It's very active. You're taking cues constantly. You mix it line by line. So, somebody has a line, you put their mic up and nobody else's mic up, back and forth throughout the entire script. So you're taking a lot of cues. So I had my computer completely go down, and you have a backup computer.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it failed in such a way that both computers were completely non-functional. So I had to mix the show manually.
Oh, wow.
And that was really hard.
Yeah.
It was hard, but we got through it. And the cast was great because it was very different for them on stage, and they knew what was happening, and we went up late and we got through it. But yeah, a friend of mine told me I saw him on the way home to the bus after that, and he was like, "Yeah, you only get one of those in your whole career, so you got it out of the way."
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, you could breathe easy now.
Right.
So what superpower do you bring to the table? And is it something that you were born with, or did you learn it?
Probably my ears. I have good ears, and I was born with that. I don't know. I probably got it from my dad. I think he has a musical gift that he doesn't let shine all the time. But I definitely have good ears, and it's obviously a very valuable skill to have. That, coupled with the concentration thing that we were talking about earlier,
Sure.
the ability to hone in on different parts of the mix as it's going past you and still not lose the overall picture. It's mixing a show for me now is it is kind of a meditative state. And when you can get to that point where nothing else is getting in, you're just hearing the show. You're just
Uh-huh.
listening to the show. It's a really great place to be.
Oh, that's like a happy place.
It's a very happy place. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Is there a mentor or someone that you had along the way that was really kind of instrumental in helping you as far as your career goes?
Yeah, I had two that stand out, and one is Wayne Jackson from the IU audio program. He just he was who, first of all, by throwing me the work that he did, he enabled me to be able to quit my waitressing gig, and I was able to do sound gigs to pay for college as I was there.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. It really, thank God for all the people that were eating at Chi-Chi's in Bloomington, Indiana at the
Oh,
time.
God.
It was really, so that they were blessed by that.
Oh, that's so funny.
I learned an awful lot from him. He was very basic. He's like, it's line levels and signal flow, and Wayne was no bullshit, and he taught me an awful lot. He really is why I do what I do today. And I think the other one is the guy that took me out on my first tour. I was his assistant on the Annie Get Your Gun tour, Bones, and he showed me that you could. Well, see, part of my story is that I'm sober, and I've been sober since 1998. And the entertainment business doesn't really attract a great deal of sober people, but I do seem to meet every one of them. So when you're out on the road with a group of people and, everybody's hitting the bars every night, it can get very isolating
Oh, sure.
if you're not into that. And there's kind of, when you don't drink, there's only so much of hanging out in the bars that you can do and be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So he showed me that it's possible to have a life while you're on the road. But I think the biggest thing that he showed me was how to take your attitude out of the equation, especially when you're dealing with people. I remember I did a bunch of like industrial gigs when I was living out in Phoenix in between doing musicals, and I would frequently call him, and I'd be complaining about the way some other guy was mixing, or something like that, and he would be all like, "Nobody cares what Mix Master Julie has to say. What's your job? Are you there as a systems tech? Then shut up and tech the system." That's really important. Because it's true when you're, I guess, overstepping the lines of your job, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares what you have to say when it's not your job. So I don't know. I'm rambling, but
No,
yeah.
that's great. So how do you remove your attitude from it? Is that back to the meditation again?
Well, it's kind of second nature now, most of the time, not all the time, to sort of, stop and say, okay, what's my function here? What is my responsibility? And what's important? What's truly important? Very rarely is my opinion what's important. Usually what's important is what service I need to provide. How can I meet the needs of these people that are asking me to help them? And that's the big shift for me.
That's
Because
huge.
when I came into this business, I think like many of us, especially, chicks that come into this business, we have the chick chip on our shoulder.
Uh-huh.
And you think that any critique that's coming at you is based on your sex. And actually most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's it's aimed at your attitude. That was a big lesson for me to learn.
When did that finally kick in? Like, what was your aha moment with that?
I don't know that I had an aha moment really. I think it's more of a thing that I've learned over time.
Mm-hmm.
And even when Jersey Boys began 10 years ago, there were not that many women in sound in New York. I mean, I certainly didn't feel like the only one, but I felt like there were about 6 of us. In all honesty, there were probably about 12 of us, but there were really not a lot. And so much has changed in that 10 years. When I was in the shop last fall, rebuilding, yet another version of the tour to remount, I looked up and on the floor in every zone, every show building, there were 3 or 4 women, and I didn't know a single one of them. And I was like, oh my God, where did all these girls come from? This is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
Such a change.
Any idea like why you might see more women actually working now in areas like this?
It possibly is just interest. It may be just that they have seen other people doing it.
Mm-hmm.
When you see somebody who is like you doing something that you would like to do, it's a very powerful example and proof that it's possible for you to do something.
Absolutely.
It may be that. I honestly couldn't tell you. It always surprises me just to see so many women coming into the business and flourishing, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Is there anything that you know now that we haven't covered that you wish you would have known when you were starting out that you're like, oh my God, that would have made life so much easier?
No, I don't think so. That sort of feels like regret a little bit to me, and I firmly believe that at least for me, I come to awarenesses as I'm able to handle them.
Yeah.
And if somebody had shoved a giant ball of truth at me before I was ready to handle it, it just wouldn't have made any impact. Or else it would have ruined me. I don't know.
Oh, that's so true. I hadn't thought about it that way. So what's the most mind-blowing experience that you've had so far where you're like, oh my God, did that just even really happen?
I did a reading for Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon is the hit musical that the South Park guys wrote.
Yeah.
And it's actually the show that my husband is the production sound engineer for now. But sometimes we do these readings or workshops where you either do an out-of-town tryout for a show or you set up in a rehearsal space and you do it for like a week or 2, and then you throw it up in front of investors to see if anybody wants to invest in it. So this was one of those readings, and I was really only doing it because all of the sound designers, other guys, including my husband, were booked on other shows at the time. Yeah, so I'm mixing this thing, and it's the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, it's unbelievable. And Matt and Trey are standing at the end of my console, bouncing ideas back and forth. And Jack O'Brien was the assistant designer on that at the time, and he had to do some recordings of them. And I can't remember which one of them it was that had to do some of the Jesus voiceovers, and you could just totally hear Cartman in his voice. And That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I would have to say that's a pretty good day on the job.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Julie, what would you say has been most critical to your success? Has it been networking? Is it just the fact that you're really good at your job? What do you think's been key? Or is it your attitude?
You know what? I'm not sure that people that work with me would agree about the attitude, but I think, networking, it's kind of an ambiguous term, but networking really is what, the business, the theater side of the business is built on. It's always one thing leads to the next. We always all gossip like old ladies, everything about everybody. And, if you're difficult to work with, it gets out. And if you're a really gifted mixer, that gets out. And if you're a genius with, programming and networking and all that, it gets out. There's also a great deal of loyalty in the Broadway community. So, for instance, I'm connected with Steve Kennedy, the sound designer, and Andrew Keister, who is his co-sound designer. And I've worked for them for pretty much my entire, professional career. And that loyalty, I guess that would fall under networking. But
Definitely,
we pass people around too. People will go from one camp to another, and it really all depends on your reputation and what people say working with you is like. And I think it's just very important to, that's the advice that I would impart on, young people today coming into the business, is your ability to work well with others is pretty much as important as your skill set. And unless you're more of a genius than anybody else in the entire industry,
Mm-hmm.
if you're the one guy that can write code that nobody else can write, then perhaps we'll forgive your, social inadequacies,
Right.
but not unless.
Yeah. Nobody wants to work with a jackass.
Yeah. There's only so much of that can be forgiven, really.
That is so true. So true.
And I think too that when I did a small design of South Pacific in the winter at Indiana University, and I got to see all the girls that are in the recording arts program now, and they had a lot of questions about, do you run into sexism? Do you run into all of that? And I have to say that in Broadway in New York, I do not.
Really?
Now, yeah, really, I do not. I have run into it in other places and in other parts of the industry. For instance, doing live sound for rock and roll,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the club level, that was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Sexism wise, there were people that just simply would not even acknowledge you because you were a girl.
Wow.
But what I told them is that the sexism tends to exist on the smaller levels. The smaller minded people have the smaller ideas. And as you get better and move up in the world, you're going to encounter less of that. And like my greatest piece of advice for them is, as much as possible, get rid of the chip on your shoulder about it, because nothing makes people more defensive than you being defensive. If somebody says something to you, like, this high end is really killing me and I need you to smooth it out. If you hear this high end is really killing me because you're a chick, then you're going to come back at them. And I don't know if that makes sense, but
completely.
When we filter everything through a lens of sexism, it's just going to attract more sexism to us. And, I'm not saying to be, a frickin' doormat or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but especially when we're starting out, we tend to look for it, and we really have our backup about it. And I still run into things that get my backup, and I have to check myself and see, like, should I have my backup about this or not? And it just depends on the situation.
Yeah, definitely. That is fantastic advice. Thank you for that. All right, we're getting to the fun stuff now. The really fun stuff. All right, so what's on the Julie mixtape that would be the soundtrack of your life?
Ha!
Because there will be a playlist that goes along with this episode.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, a lot of Rush.
Nice.
A lot of Rush and Queensryche and
Oh,
Dream
yeah.
Theater, Lita Ford.
Sweet.
But like I mentioned before, the Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris and the Jayhawks. God, what else have I? You know what I've been listening to lately that's really strange? It's this band called Shovels and Rope.
I love them.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wow. I've been listening to that a lot lately, and St. Paul and the Broken Bones,
Mm-hmm.
My Chemical Romance.
Cool.
You know, it sort of depends on the mood, but I always go back to my progressive metal.
Yeah. Oh, that's so much fun. I'm going to have a really good time putting this playlist together. What is it about those Graham and Emmylou records for you?
There's something about he's like the father of alt country, except really he was kind of just a rich kid that was, fucked up all the time. But there's a magic on those albums that is purely because of Emmylou Harris. Those albums, and I'm talking about the two, GP and Grievous Angel, I think, are what they are. They usually sell it on one disc. She's magic. And I also really love some of his lyrics. Like, some of the songs don't make any damn sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them, I remember listening to that album when I was driving out west, in the desert. I had to drive between Phoenix and Tucson and San Diego frequently. And, just you get that desert landscape at midnight and that giant moon that comes out there, listening to Graham Parsons.
Yeah.
And just like, it's just awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of perfection right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his and Emmylou's as well. So, So what's revving your creative engines right now? What new projects are you working on?
Well, I am getting ready to go back into the shop to re-prep the musical On Your Feet. It's the Gloria Estefan and Emilio musical. It's their story, their music.
Oh, nice.
We just did production in Chicago. I was out there for 3 months, which was a really long time to be away from my family.
Oh, yeah.
Really long. But it's a great project. The 10 years that I've been on Jersey Boys, the technology for live sound, especially in theater, is completely different, 100% different. It's just, you still deal with sound waves, but that's about the only thing that's the same. So to have a chance to do another big new show with new gear this time, it's been great. I've had to learn a lot. I've had to read books. The whole networking aspect of the systems is a brand new thing for me. And it's amazing. The system that Andrew has designed is mind-blowing. And it's just great. And her band, 4 guys from her band are in our band. And Gloria and Emilio were around an awful lot during production. And she's really interesting to watch work as well. She's quite a musician. And she had several sessions with the band where she would just go up there and they would be looking at the arrangements and she'd say, "No, try this," and she'd like spout off a rhythm or something and they would do it. And then somebody would go, "No, let's try this." And then she'd say, "I want it exactly like this." And it was just great to watch her work and shape the arrangements into what they are becoming.
That's cool.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So we will rebuild in the shop for a couple of weeks. Then we start loading into the theater. I think that's roughly a month that we have to load in before we see the cast. And while we start in the shop, they start up in the rehearsal room again and start implementing changes that the writers have done, the writer and the directors. And we'll go through the whole process all over again and start previews in New York in October and open November 6th, I think it is. November 5th. Yeah, somewhere around in there.
That's exciting.
Yeah, very.
Cool. So will you be working on that as well, or will you still be doing Jersey Boys?
I'm taking a leave from Jersey Boys to do On Your Feet.
Okay, cool.
So I've got probably just a couple of weeks left on Jersey Boys.
Cool. Well, Julie, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you so much.
That's all, folks. You can check out the show notes at brassybroad.com. The conversation continues over at the Brassy Broadcast page on Facebook or on Twitter and Instagram at BrassyBroadGen. And don't forget to check out the playlist for this episode on Spotify. You can find me over there at BrassyBroadGen. One last thing. If you got a little nugget of value or just enjoyed the conversation, please leave a rating and review over at iTunes. Rumor has it that those ratings and reviews help more people discover the show. Or even better, share it with a friend that you think would dig it. Now be brazen, be bold, and get out in the world and do some good.